Good afternoon. My name is Naomi Kelly, and I'm the City Administrator for the City and County of San Francisco. And I am joined here today with Mayor Edwin Lee, Board of Supervisor President David Chiu, the Filipino Consulate General Reginald Bernabe, and many members from the Filipino community here in San Francisco. And today we have a huge announcement that represents San Francisco values. For the first time since our Language Access Ordinance was enacted in 2001 and amended in 2009, we are adding a new language to the list of shared languages. This step makes our city safer, more inclusive, and better able to serve our residents. Language access for limited English proficient individuals is mandated by local, state, and federal law. And our city enacted its Language Access Ordinance in 2001. In 2009, the Language Access Ordinance was amended to require that our Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs to determine which languages meets a threshold. And essentially, that is 10,000 or more San Franciscans who speak a shared language other than English and are limited English proficient. This determination must be made by the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs to all city departments and to the Immigrant Rights Commission. It is now my honor to introduce Mayor Edwin Lee. Mayor Lee was city administrator in 2009 when the amendments happened. He spent his early career as a tenant and an immigrant rights advocate and continues to expand opportunity as mayor to build bridges between our cultures and communities. Mayor Lee?
Thank you, Naomi. And thank you to the Bayanihan Center for welcoming us today. Mabuhay. Thank you. I practiced saying that just on a recent trip, so I know how to do it. Council General, thank you for being here. Mayor Lee and all the volunteers and staff here that have been working with the city for many, many years to make sure that we have equal access to all of the city services. David Chiu just reminded me that it didn't used to be called the Language Access Ordinance. Back in 2001, it was equal access to all the city services. And I'm a firm believer, not only have been working in government for all these years, but we are an international city, and we're a city of immigrants. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau confirmed that a third of our population here in San Francisco speak a different language, come from different countries, but they also want to be San Franciscans. And with that, we've had an obligation, and one that we have strongly felt was a good purpose of government. And I joined Board President David Chiu, and I know Supervisor Kim and Supervisor Avalos will shortly be here as well. They had a kind of late night meeting last night, debating very important issues. But I joined them because I know each of the three have a very strong Filipino and other Asian and minority and Latino populations in their districts. And certainly right here in this district, this extremely strong presence. Well, with that, and with the international status of the city, comes the clear obligation that we must be able to make sure our vital services are ones that reach all of our citizens. And when they have a language barrier, as indicated by many of them who don't have English as their first language, indicate through the American Community Survey under the U.S. Census Bureau that over 10,000 of them have reached a point where English is not their native language. We must react to making sure that all of our vital services are also accessible to them. What does that really mean? That means, as we've done for Chinese-speaking and for Spanish-speaking residents of our city, it means that we work with all of our public safety departments to make sure they have adequate information that is translated, and there is language accessibility on site whenever people need that very vital service. It also means all of our other vital services, whether they be human services, health, all the other important things, are also translated when there's written materials, or where there's big meetings, we provide translators electronically or physically, and make sure every outreach program that we have is culturally competent in reaching it. When you reach that magic 10,000 person level, it's important to note that this is a threshold that we all agreed to as part of the language access ordinance, that we as a city would then make sure we did a needs assessment so that our services can be translated properly and people can make that access for them and their families. You know, gone are the days where I used to translate for my mom and dad when they couldn't access things, whether it was a hospital or benefits. And I know virtually everybody standing with me in this room at some point in time did the exact same thing, that there wasn't access properly and you were very nervous. And you were also nervous when you weren't really understanding whether or not a medical term was accurate, or if you wanted to access public safety, whether you were doing it efficiently or not. And so I begin by saying thank you to all the generations of Filipino Americans here in San Francisco who went through things that I did, and I'm sure David Chiu did, and others in our steed, the Spanish community and the Chinese community have done for years, is to help our family and help our society, our community, get the information and get services that they need. Now, hopefully, we won't rely on you so much for that. That government and its services will reflect what we need to do to make sure accessibility is there without barriers. I have to and I must, and I will thank all of the different groups that have been advocates for language access, for equal access to all the services. And the list of community partners is very important because they push us to make sure we do all the right things. Chinese for Affirmative Action, African Advocacy Network, the Arab Resource and Organizing Center, Bernal Heights Neighborhood Center, Central American Resource Center, the Filipino Community Center right here. People organizing to demand environmental and economic rights and self-help for the elderly. They have been the heart of making sure that our language access is clear. And now we will go about doing the assessments. Our Office of Community Engagement and Immigrant Affairs will work with Immigrant Rights Commission and all the various departments, as well as our city administrator, for the next 18 months, quicker if we hope, to assess all the needs of each department, working with them, and particularly beginning with those vital departments of public safety and health, to make sure that they're staffed appropriately, that they have all the different support. We've already hired a Tagalog translator in the Office of Civic Engagement. He's already started. And I know this is important. I know Supervisor Kim just walked in. It's important to this community and all the other communities citywide. I know Supervisor Avalos is coming right in now. He and I have been to the Filipino community out in Outer Mission, and also they want to make sure that they get services out there as well, and so this would be of great help. We have generations of families who I think have had barriers, and now with more accurate information coming out of the U.S. Census Bureau through the American Community Survey, we can do this and we set a threshold. I'm proud of our city to make sure we are working with our community partners, getting rid of all the barriers so that access to our services is equal to everyone. That doesn't say, too, that when we're doing major outreach, it won't just be limited to Chinese, to Spanish, or to Tagalog. We also need to work with our Korean community. We also need to work with our Vietnamese community. We also need to work with our South American communities that are growing every year so that when we do big campaigns, we don't just say, you haven't reached the 10,000 threshold. We're going to reach out to you in language appropriate and culturally competent ways as well. And this is the thrust of our city. This is what I am very particularly proud of, is that we reach and try to reach everyone that we can and make sure language is not a barrier and culture is not a barrier. So I want to thank Naomi for your leadership on this. I know the city administrator leads this effort, and within these next 18 months, and certainly reflective in our budget, we'll have the resources that we need to make sure we get this all done, with Tagalog being the focus now, but also making sure we're sensitive to the other language minorities throughout the city. It's a great city. It's one that I'm very proud of, and I'm proud to announce this today at the Bayanihan Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, I'd like to introduce our Board of Supervisor President David Chiu, who is the eldest of immigrant parents and is also the leader on the Board of Supervisors, making sure that all of the departments, are accessible to limited English-speaking persons and everyone. Yes, thank you. Supervisor Chiu.
Magandang hapon and salamat po. And by the way, we are not fighting with each other. Supervisor Kim, Supervisor Avalos, you have a Board of Supervisors that is fighting with you. I'm really excited to be part of this announcement, really for three reasons. First and foremost, today's announcement represents an incredible victory for community, for the Filipino community who has come together, who has led, who has made sure in working with your policymakers that we have a city government that is responsive to all of our communities. I'm also excited because, like John Avalos, like Jane Kim, I am the child of first-generation immigrants for whom my parents' English was not their first language. And as a former civil rights attorney, this is the sort of day that those of us who are policymakers, this is what we live for. When I first came into office in 2009, one of the first meetings I took was with a coalition of Asian American civil rights organizations that came to me that asked, how can we move forward with the language access ordinance in San Francisco? And in 2009, we made many changes to make sure that our city was truly accountable with this vision that our $7.9 billion government, our 26,000 employees, would be responsive to all of our residents, regardless of what language they spoke. And we put in a process that we knew was going to lead to a day like today, where communities would come forward and let us know that when they hit a certain mark, we would make official and certify another language that we need to translate our materials to, and that day is today. Now, I also tell you, this is very special for me because when I was in college, I studied, like all of us, the Fall of the Eye Hotel. And it's amazing that I get to represent the neighborhood where the former Manila town was, but as you know, in the 1970s, that was a dark time for our communities. And that was a moment when we were concerned about Filipinos and Asian Americans being pushed out of our city. And years later, that has changed. It has changed to where we are today. And I think it's just incredible that we're here really celebrating the diversity of our city, celebrating the Filipino community, celebrating Tagalog, and celebrating who we are as San Franciscans. So I just, again, want to thank all of you for your work and end with one word, which you heard the mayor say, mabuhay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Chiu. Next, I'd like to introduce Supervisor Jane Kim, who represents District 6, where we are here today. And she has been working diligently with our office, the City Administrator, the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, and also the City Attorney to make sure that we got here today and make sure that we were able to certify Tagalog as a Tier 1 language. So, Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, Naomi, and welcome to the South of Market. I think it's really appropriate that we are celebrating the certification of Tagalog Filipino here in a neighborhood that has served as a gateway for our Filipino and Filipino-American community historically. It is also the home of Bessie Carmichael K-8 and Filipino Education Center, which is the first school in the country to have a bilingual, bicultural Tagalog program. And it's really amazing to have that here. I know Supervisor Avalos and I both represent the largest numbers of Filipino and Filipino Americans here in San Francisco. I think District 6 won because we're a little closer to City Hall. But still, it's great to be here with the community today at Bayanihan Center. You know, it was really the community that pushed for the recognition of this community, and to have this language recognized as one that all of our departments should be translating their materials in, so that Filipino and Filipino Americans can be integrated into our city services. And I do want to recognize Terry Vallon from Filipino Community Center for leading that fight, along with Rudy Asurcion. He was here in the South of Market. We actually have many South of Market leaders. Byrne from from here at the center, and of course Bishop, we have Jessalyn Manalo, who is here as well, and Marilee Mondahar, one of our District 6 residents, longtime leader. It was interesting actually that President Chiu brought up the fall of the I Hotel, because I think many of us studied this in college. I was born the year of the fall of the I Hotel, and I think everyone in this room has seen that documentary. It's one of the most moving documentaries that I think many of us have seen, not just because Asian Americans were leading the struggle and have been a long part of the civil rights movement here in this country, and fighting for our rights, whether it's around housing, voting, and others. But it was also amazing to see the coalition that was amassed to fight for our Manongs and Chinese seniors that lived in the I Hotel, to see women, to see the Black Panthers, to see folks all around the city fighting for our seniors to have a place to live. And 30 years later, we were able to rebuild the I Hotel to be permanent affordable housing for seniors. And it took too long, but the one thing I can say about this community is that they persevere. And 30 years later, we're fighting displacement again, and Filipino American leaders are at the forefront of fighting evictions and displacement here in San Francisco. So that fight never dies, and that mentorship and leadership and advocacy still continues, and I'm really proud to represent this community. So congratulations to everyone for their work. I do want to thank the mayor and Naomi Kelly for fighting for this. We could not have done this if you did not make that directive to push this to happen. And thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Next, I'd like to introduce Supervisor John Avalos, who represents District 11. And in District 11, yeah, so we should clap for that. District 11 has the largest number, more than 3,000 limited English Tagalog speakers. And Supervisor Avalos has been a strong advocate for the certification of Tagalog. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Naomi. I was going to do a hearing on the certification of Tagalog as part of our language access program. And yesterday, President Chiu was actually doing an April Fool's on how many hearings we've been doing at the Board of Supervisors. But now I don't think I have to do a hearing because of the great work and great organizing and leadership of the Filipino community from all across San Francisco. I represent District 11, which, as Naomi just says, we have 3,000 Tagalog speakers. We have many more residents who are Filipino as well. District 6, I think Jane Kim and I, our districts rival each other in terms of the size of the Filipino population. But we all believe that our government should be responsive for everyone. And the language access ordinance that Supervisor Chiu had championed back in 2009 is really about that. It lives up to the promise that we need to make sure that residents can make the most of government services that are available, that we actually can use government to our own good and self-determination, and that would never come about without the great organizing in this community. So I think Jane and President Chiu and the mayor, Naomi, all talked about some of the leaders who were mentioned. I think one who wasn't mentioned was Rachel Iborra, who is with the Bernal Heights Community Center, who has done a lot of outreach into District 11, into the Filipino community as well, and making sure young people get served. I also want to thank Naomi, the mayor, for actually making this happen. It's been a long time coming, and of course, this is a great victory. It just shows like all the major victories that have happened for working class communities have come through organizing and activism, and this is just one of the many that we've had, and many more to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. So we are here today at the Bayanihan Center, which is home to many important community programs. One of these programs is the Veterans Equity Center. Their mission is to honor the valuable contributions of Filipino Americans during World War II in their fight for freedom and democracy, and to provide culturally and linguistically appropriate services and advocate for justice and equity. The leader is a woman who has worked in this community for decades, and we are pleased that she is our host today. Please welcome Luisa Antonio, Executive Director of VEC.
Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to thank the community for really moving this issue forward in a Bayanihan spirit. We are very resilient, and we move making sure that everybody comes together and move this forward. I also would like to thank the leadership of the members of the Board of Supervisors who are present, President Chiu, Jane Kim, John Avalos, for listening to your constituents and making sure that you are responsive to whatever it is that, they are asking. And this time, it's language access. And most importantly, thank you to our mayor, Ed Lee, for making sure that he supports our community. I know about decades, like it's so telling of how old I am. But I have been a service provider in the South of Market for 23 years. And MC is smiling because he usually says I am, his intern. But all those, he always mentions that. But all those 23 years, in my previous life, I was working with at-risk youth, youth who are in the juvenile justice system. And you just don't know how it has been very difficult, to inform the parents who are responsible for this youth about the court system. And there are, at that time, I believe there was only one Filipino probation officer at YGC. So you can imagine there's a lot of them and there's only few of us who could speak Tagalog. And let's fast forward to my work, 15 years of which has been with the Filipino World War II veterans. Language has been very, very important because a lot of them have been fighting for their benefits. A lot of them have been denied their benefits. A lot of them have been going to hospitals, and it has been very difficult to get the services because it wasn't in their language. And even if they say, do you speak English? They will say yes. But when it comes to official documents, understanding the system, they usually revert to their native tongue, which is, a lot of us, a lot of them speak Tagalog. What does it mean to have Tagalog as a tier 1 language? For our immigrant community who, in the area of housing, what does it mean? How many people have not applied for available housing because it was not in language? How many people have not been able to voice, a lot of this, if they have repairs needed in their housing, they just don't understand that there are laws and ordinances that protect them. For workers, how many actually have been very silent about the injustices in the workplace because, they don't speak the language? So today is a celebration. It may be, like we said, like it came a little late, but in the near future, once we get a lot of these services in the city, in language, materials in language, we open a lot of gates. And hopefully, the number of people who are not accessing services in the city will come forward. And that is a victory because we are truly responsive to the needs of the Filipino community. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. Next, I'd like to say a few words is the Filipino Consulate General, Mr. Benabi.
Thank you very much, Administrator Kim, Mayor Edwin Lee, Supervisors Chiu, Avalos, and Kim, the members of our Filipino community present here today. I would just like to say that you can never imagine how thankful the Filipino community is for this very generous act that you have done to us today. And I'm sure that it is very significant for them because right here where we are, the very core and home of the Filipinos, of the Filipino community in San Francisco, we have started to take Tagalog lessons for everyone, starting from the mayor. Seriously speaking, Mr. Mayor, we take great pride, and I take great pride in being in a city that takes care of its multi-ethnic community. San Francisco, as you said, is a city of diverse communities. The ordinance that is being passed, recognizing Filipino as a third language, is certainly a recognition of the contributions of this great community, the Filipinos. And certainly it's also very significant for them because not only is an act of access to language and services, but it also makes them open up the city to themselves and makes it feel like a home for them. Certainly for many Filipinos that are first time here in San Francisco and in the Bay Area, this is something wonderful and that is truly different when they are far away from home. So with this, I'd like to thank you again, Mr. Mayor, the supervisors, Ms. City Administrator Kelly, for this great big act of compassion and kindness and understanding and responsiveness to the needs of our community. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Terry Vallon, who is the organizational director and founder of the Filipino Community Center. Terry was recently elected and serves as the national president of the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns. Terry has also been a great partner with the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs as part of the Language Access Network, and also was very helpful during the 2010 census. So Terry?
Thank you all for being here today, for sponsoring this press conference, Mayor Ed Lee, for helping us move this forward. I remember talking to you during a Thanksgiving lunch about this specific issue in our community, and I thank you again for lending your ear and for helping us to move this forward. I forgot to say magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. Hapon is afternoon and tanghali is like lunchtime, so that's where we're at. We're gonna have some food later, and that was one of my first Tagalog lessons. I'm not a fluent Tagalog speaker. I had to study it at UCLA. I went to the Philippines to learn the language, but with my limited Tagalog proficiency, every day at the Filipino Community Center since we started, I had to do what you all mentioned. We have to every day help our Filipino community members access services. I help people get food stamps, access immigration legal services, to go to fight for their workers' rights. So this is something that's ongoing. The days aren't gone past, but we're doing it every day. A lot of the people in this room are doing that here in District 6, in District 11, and across the city. I also want to thank you, City Administrator Naomi Kelly, for your work on this in particular, and Supervisor David Chiu for proposing the amendment and passing it in 2009, and for supporting us throughout this whole process. Your staff, Amy Chan, there's so many people to thank. Supervisor Kim and Avalos, there was Ivy Lee and April Veneracion, and then in Supervisor Avalos' office, Raquel Rodaniez and Francis Ye. And then also a couple of supervisors who are not here, Supervisor David Campos, Carolyn Goosen in his office, and then Supervisor Eric Marr, Victor Lim there also were all supportive, offering their advocacy and guidance throughout this whole process. So there's so many people that have helped to make this happen, but in particular, we're standing on the shoulders of as others have mentioned, of the Filipino community that's been here for decades, almost a century here, fighting for housing, fighting for our rights as workers, as immigrants, to live in San Francisco. We're supervisors who've been representing the District 6 and 11, we're still fighting to stay and live in this city, and we hit that threshold of 10,000. But we know, as Luisa mentioned, that's an undercount. That's people themselves who are saying that I don't speak enough English, and the Philippines being a colony of the United States for so many years, people want to say that they speak English, so they're not going to self-report. So there's definitely an undercount, and we know that we're way past the threshold, and we have been probably for decades. So we're very happy we got to this point, and it took work, and it took time, and it took the perseverance of the community, but we're here today, and we're so very happy that we are here today. As I mentioned, every day, nonprofit staff, nurses and health professionals in the hospitals, government employers, there's so many Filipino government employees, even children, school-age children are translating for their parents, for their grandparents, and all of these people are doing this, and they're not being recognized for it, but they're doing it every day because we have to. And the certification of Tagalog, of Filipino, the official name of the language in the Philippines, is a big step forward and a big step in the right direction to make sure that we can continue to be a city of immigrants and welcoming of immigrants, and a city for the Filipino community and all of the limited English proficient communities in San Francisco. The Filipino Community Center is a proud member of the new San Francisco Language Access Network, and we're proud to have worked with OCEA, the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, to be part of that network with Adrian Pan, Isis Fernandez-Sykes, Richard Whipple, and our new Tagalog language specialist, Sandra Panopio, who we'll be working with. right, going forward. So, now the process is new. This is the first language certified under the amendments of the Language Access Ordinance, and we look forward to working with other community partners to certify other languages. And we hope to actually help perfect the process and make it better, especially in the implementation stages, so that we can make it as strong step forward as possible for all of us. So we look forward to working with Sandra and all of the community groups that are here, the Bernal Heights Neighborhood Center, the Bayanihan Community Center, FADF, which is our host today, the VEC, Bishop. I don't want to miss anybody. Who else do we have here? There's members of Gabriela, Ally, Active Leadership to Advance These. These are grassroots community organizations that are all here today. So we want to thank all of them for coming, for being here today. Again, this is a big step forward. It's been almost a century of Filipinos in this city, and this is a major step forward in the right direction to recognize the contribution and the presence and the ongoing strength of our community in San Francisco. So thank you all for coming here today, and thank you all for all of your work.
Thank you, Terry. I would like to introduce Grace Lee, the Policy Director for Chinese for Affirmative Action. At CAA, Grace focuses on immigrant rights, language access, and racial justice issues. CAA is part of the Language Access Network and is a great community partner with Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs. Grace.
So I'll try to make this quick. Today's Wednesday, and I'm just thinking about the irony of today for CAA, because we have staff members who are fasting for immigration reform because we have congressional leaders who are not being responsive to the community. And so today is such a wonderful celebration of how lucky we are in San Francisco to have so many supervisors and our mayor and our city administrator here in support of the community. As David Chiu mentioned, back in 2009, CAA was involved with the efforts to strengthen the Language Access Ordinance, and a lot of those efforts were in contemplation of a day like today. We wanted to put in place a policy that could be responsive and that would allow our city and policies to adapt to the changing demographics of our city. And here we are today, and it's just very exciting. We have some partners from the Language Access Network here. As mentioned, Bernal Heights Neighborhood Center is here, and then also Mujeres Unidas y Activas. They're a new partner with the Language Access Network. We know that this work is very difficult, that it is resource intensive, it takes time and money and training. But at the same time, our community partners, we are gonna go back to our offices and we're gonna continue that hard work of having to work with our clients who to honestly tell us that they feel ashamed or that they feel helpless and that they feel invisible because of their language barriers. And so in light of that, all of us here today, there's nothing more important for us to try to remedy that and for us to do better. So today is just very exciting. I don't need to repeat more, but we're really excited. And as Terry mentioned, the community has been doing this work for a very long time. We are excited to be here to continue this collaboration. We have OSEA here, our elected officials, other community members. It's really San Francisco at its best when we're all here today working better. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. This ends our press conference, and the mayor and some of our elected officials are here for limited questions afterwards. Thank you.